Now, after finishing speaking about the ego, I have a video here called Labeling and Naming. Super amazing. I thought about that when I was walking around the house 4 days ago. I was just considering the strength of the English word. So I would like to point at something. One thing that's very important. I did a random video about poetry because I was thinking about random things the other day, and one of them was this, and it's labeling and naming. Uh, what's the difference? What's the difference between a name given to something and a label given onto something? I feel like the more I researched my health, the more I realized I wasn't healthy. And the more I started trusting my body to do its thing instead of kind of obsessing over the namings of the different parts of the body, the more I started kind of feeling better and getting stronger and being more flexible and all this stuff. As I progressed over the past 5 years between being completely ignorant of the world and just researching, I realized one of the bigger things that we do as human beings is we name and label things. The labeling part is more of a judgment from our side in order for us to understand it better. But the naming part is when we give life to something. This philosophy is embodied in an anime that I watch. It's Bleach. And one of the strongest powers in Bleach is the guy who has the sword. The sword basically gives a name to something or takes the name out of it. The concept of it is amazing because, uh, in the Bible, they talk about the word that first came out of God that created all of this. And that kind of that enunciation, that kind of the whole thing, the spell that was cast on top of people. And I think that's where, when consciousness hits us as human beings, the first thing we did was we kind of started speaking. And it wasn't really consciousness as in consciousness the way we feel it now. Our evolution to understand consciousness is still getting more and more and more and more and more and more. And it seems like the more suffering the world has, the closer we get to consciousness and the closer we get to a global understanding of consciousness. But a lot of us still fall under the whole, uh, a lot of us still fall under the whole making a decision where we are, even though we take a level upwards. And I look at myself sometimes and I go okay, so where are you now, Tariq? But anyway, I answer that question halts me and puts me in this place for a lot longer than I probably should have. And I'm not saying it's not about the goals that I set. So, when you're looking at whatever you want to do out of life, you have to just do it. But when you label where you are in terms of what you're doing it, then you're practically kind of isolating that as something that you understand and that you're comfortable with. So your mind kind of lingers around it a lot more than you would have or you should have. I think the labeling part is literally man's judgment of this world. Blue, green, red. These are the names of colors, right? Happy. We're not naming our emotions, we're labeling it. Sad, we're labeling it. One of my favorite things I read online was one time there's some days could just be like that. And when that happens, you kind of have to accept them and move on. Instead of labeling something, instead of labeling something on a vague, what am I trying to explain, man? When you're labeling, you're tagging and you're compartmentalizing. I think that makes more sense. When you're naming, you're accepting as part of a reality, right? So the beauty of the Japanese culture is it's very, in terms of its grammar, it's not as creative as the English is spoken. But the way they build on top of words is literally like Lego blocks are built. That like every word could extend to the depth of what it could mean. Like there's, I'm still learning Japanese, so I'm not going to dive into that. But that's the truth. Like they are very much like, and they articulate feelings. They give them the truth behind where they come and how they're expressed in order for us to understand completely what's going on and not leave something in a vague way. So anxiety for me is not a name, it's a label. You're labeling something. Excitement, you're labeling something. But the feeling of actually looking at your cousin getting married, that's not just pride, man. That's a specific sense of like endorphins, like not endorphins, serotonin jumping inside of you. That's a specific feeling that needs to be named. Pride, when it comes to getting a job done, or pride when it comes to watching your daughter graduate, or pride when it comes to seeing the people that you've been working with for 10 years finally achieve what they wanted out of life. Each of these are a different feeling labeled under one thing. And I think the difference between labeling and naming is the life in whatever it is that's being kind of either labeled or named. My heart has a name. My stomach is named. They have life pumping through them. They have energy. Love is a name. I think at one point we mixed out. There's a beautiful saying that's like if you meet somebody and they're making your heart beat fast and they're making you think a lot, that's not love, that's anxiety. And yeah, that's basically how anxiety kind of reveals itself, right? Like, what are the things that kind of like, what are the feelings that promote anxiety? Well, stress promotes anxiety. Rushing into something promotes anxiety. Failing at something promotes anxiety. Overthinking about something promotes anxiety. Like, fuck. Suddenly you have all these things under one label. And instead of being able to articulate them in order to understand what truly we feel, like sometimes, like even the Japanese, man, they have like, fuck, I forgot the name, the meaning. But like, they have, if you actually eat and you're not hungry, they call it, they basically have a name for it. It's called the water, my mouth is lonely. My mouth is lonely. Imagine, sorry, I'm looking for it right now. Kuchi, kuchi sabishi. Kuchi means mouth and sabishi means like lonely. Imagine they, when it comes to naming the things that are a part of their life, they have done it in a way that completely eliminates the whole vagueness of the reality in front of them. They have been able to pinpoint exactly how they're feeling and when they are feeling it in order for them to be able to like deal with it. Whilst I think with the English language, most of the time we kind of like are lost with I'm not sure. And I've had that before. Like I once was talking to somebody and I was like, what are the things you like? And she's like, what do you want to do? And she goes like, I don't know. And like at 20 minutes later, I go like, you still didn't answer that question. She goes like, no, I told you I don't know. And she got upset. And I'm like, that's not a fucking answer. There's something, anything. There has to be something that triggers you. But the concept of her doing something or how she feels about the world was so vague and so like desperately stretched She wasn't able to kind of point at one thing that allows her to move in any direction. Imagine being stuck and accepting the fact that you're clueless and being okay. Be clueless, that's fine, but be clueless while you're figuring something out, not be clueless while you're just standing there hoping something happens. Labeling versus naming. When you give something a name, you're practically giving it life. You're giving it something to stand up to own up to live up to. You're breathing life into it, manifesting life into it, manifesting it into life. It becomes a part of life. When you label something, you kind of like judge it and compartmentalize it on the side or something. Yeah, I feel that kind of like links and makes me feel a lot stronger towards these two words. Even animals, man, you're okay eating meat from the supermarket because you don't know where it came. But if you had a pet cow and it's named, you won't be able to do anything about it. Right. It came to me because I was reading the book, The Unbearable Lightness of Being. And they discussed the difference between when you name your farm animal and when you don't. And that's where I was like, they're labeled cows, but they're individually named different names. I think human beings should be able to understand the world differently and make it a more personal thing to them. I don't really think that globalization, the way it's happening right now, is something that human beings are able to handle mentally, consciously, psychologically. But these are my own thoughts. I try my best not to have an opinion. Thank you.